So every time I try to record this lecture, a large truck drives by. And I think it's to personally attack me and drive me crazy. But we will give this another go. This is part one of the lectures on the metaphysics of evil. This Antonio Wolff piece about Berserk. And before I explain why we're reading this piece and what continental philosophy is and all of that good stuff, I want to tell you a story. You woke up this morning and you made choices. Maybe you went to the bathroom, brushed your teeth, got dressed, ate breakfast. If you ate breakfast, you made a choice about what to have for breakfast. Maybe it was cereal, maybe it was a breakfast bagel, something like that. The point being is you made choices. It feels like you were in control of those choices, that you had something called free will. But there's a strong current in contemporary philosophy that you don't have free will. These individuals are called incompatibilists. They think that free will is incompatible with something called determinism. And all determinism says is that given the laws of nature, so the way the world works, the way the universe works, plus everything that's ever occurred, there's only one way that things could actually go. So if we imagine a timeline of events, okay, we think like, okay, I can have cereal for breakfast or I can have a breakfast bagel. And it seems like there's two options, right? When in reality, given the laws of nature, plus everything that's ever occurred, you really only could have cereal for breakfast. It's the only option. You didn't actually make that choice. Your choices, your actions were determined. So you lack free will. And this is a really, really strong view. It's really well defended, well picked up. There are people that disagree with it. But the upshot is, if you think the world is determined, and lots of people do, right? Either for religious reasons or they think it's determined because, like, well, the laws of nature exist and we do make really good predictions given the laws of nature plus what we know about the past. So it seems like we're determined. And then this question of, okay, well, if we are determined, how do we have free will? Like I said, some people were compatibilists. Some people are incompatibilists. They think that we can have determinism and free will. We're not going to adjudicate this issue. We're going to talk about it, but we're not going to adjudicate it because it's one of numerous issues we could talk about in metaphysics. But I do want you to keep in mind that some people think that you don't have free will. In fact, you might think that you don't have free will. It seems like you have free will, but you don't. Lots of people think this, maybe even you. So that brings us to this Antonio Wolff piece about the metaphysics of Berserk, the idea of evil in Berserk. And the reason that we're talking about this is because there's a couple of different types of philosophy out there, a couple of different methodologies. And the one that we're going to talk about is continental. That's continental like the continents. So looks like that, C-O-N-T. And versus analytic. We've done analytic philosophy a few times already this semester. I don't even know if I've called it by that name yet. But all the analytic philosophy does is it's just a methodology. You begin with principles and assumptions about the world that you feel are you can argue for or appear obviously true, and then you use them to support premises toward a conclusion. So for instance, Descartes, despite the fact that he exists before this kind of divide appears in philosophy between continental and analytic, is taking an analytic approach. He's beginning with an assumption about the way people work, that we can see ideas clearly and distinctly and that we can get knowledge, adding in what he believes to be an obvious truth that God exists and that we exist, and from there arguing that the world outside of us exists and that we can have objective access to it. Like we can understand, for instance, when I look at this cup, I have direct access to the way this cup actually is. I'm not just experiencing it as blue, it literally is blue. Of course, there's a different story to tell about that. For instance, like, well, I just have eyes that can see wavelengths of blue bouncing off of this object at particular, frequencies. My eyes can pick up those frequencies, and thus I can see that it's blue. Some of you guys may be colorblind in a particular way that you don't even see that cup is blue, right? So maybe we don't have access to objects as they actually are in the world just through our experiences. And that's what continental philosophy argues. Well, we have a subjective experience about the world, so we should start there. right? What it actually means to be human in the world, because I mean, these premises, these assumptions about how we operate and what we have access to, maybe lead us astray. So we should start with a different approach, which is rather than premises and principles, we start with our experiences. That's continental philosophy. And it is based on these methods, these ideas produced by this individual named Kant. Right? Kant. It's not called continental because of Kant. It's called continental because that's where the dudes who were doing it were located, on the European continent. So you have the guys in Britain and Scotland, and they're doing what looks like analytic philosophy. And you have the people in Denmark, France, Germany primarily doing a different looking sort of philosophy, and that's continental. So people in the UK were just like, that's continental. That's different from what we do. And so that's why it's called continental. But they accept this thing called idealism. And idealism is just, again, this idea that we, it means a lot of different things, but in this context, it means that we have a mediated interpretation or experience of the world. So we can interact with the world, but it's only through our perceptions and our interpretations or experiences of those perceptions. We don't get to interact with the world directly. We get to interact through kind of our ideas of the world. That's why it's called idealism. In the case of this piece, Berserk, and the Metaphysics of Berserk by Wolff, the idealism in question is sort of a little bit different, a little bit stronger, which is that our ideas of reality can impact reality. And before you think like, that's just crazy, Layla, that sounds like hogwash. Well, we've already encountered a thinker who seems to kind of imply or argue that actually how we think about the world impacts what actually occurs in the world. William James, he says, if you treat somebody like they're trustworthy, they might just rise to the occasion and become trustworthy because you're treating them as trustworthy. So we have this idea that this person is trustworthy, so we act on that idea, and then they just make it so that they're trustworthy. So reality kind of bends to the idea that we have. This isn't to say that there's not an objective reality out there, just that we can influence what occurs in the world in a particular way. And so that's the sort of idealism in question. And before moving on to, getting into the details of this piece, I just want to briefly explain, like, we're talking about continental philosophy because it's one way to do philosophy. And rather than have you read like Heidegger or Hegel, who are really tough to get your teeth into, we're going to take this continental methodology and apply it to the world of Berserk through Antonio Wolff's piece. For two reasons. One, I want you guys to encounter continental philosophy. It's interesting, it's different, and it's really fun. And two, you don't need to have any preconceived notions about reality in order to understand the methodology Wolff is using. When we talk about Descartes, for instance, here's a really easy argument against Descartes. God doesn't exist. What are we going to do now, Descartes? Right? So you kind of have to get on the same footing as the other person in order to even have the conversation that they want to have. And the same is kind of true of continental philosophy. All right, Hegel, really cool story. I don't believe in a world spirit. Doesn't really matter what he's talking about there. Just think, I don't think that's true. I don't think history has agency. And boom, this whole argument, this whole conception of reality that you've described doesn't exist for me. All right, fine. Let's talk about a fictional world that we can make descriptive claims of that can be inaccurate or accurate, Berserk, and take this methodology, which is rigorous and serious in its application, apply it to this fictional world, and we can draw parallels to our own world through this process. So my claim isn't that the world of Berserk is our world. My claim is that we can take this continental methodology, see how it functions in describing this fictional world, and draw parallels to our own world. And that's why we're taking this approach.